Be me, Daniel. Average dude making a living crunching numbers. Our analytics crew is tiny 6 desks clustered together. Happens to be all men, not because of some grand plan, just how the hiring pool played out. We've built a reputation for delivering results, and not the surface-level kind. The vibe in our corner isn't sterile or silent, it hums. Not chaotic in a sloppy way, more like controlled momentum. What keeps it running isn't magic or ego. It's the non-stop back and forth. We're always bouncing ideas, questioning assumptions, sanity checking each other in real time. A guy in the corner will have an issue with a complex query. He'll shout out the problem. Someone else will have seen it before and shout back the solution. A problem that could take an hour of troubleshooting is solved in 30 seconds. Management loves our efficiency. We hit every target every time. The social glue of the team is this guy, Cal. Cal's not a comedian, but he's got a joke for every situation. His humor is never mean-spirited. It's the kind of stuff that just cuts the tension. If the servers are slow, he'll say something like, "The hamster running the wheel must have taken a coffee break." It's dumb, but it makes you chuckle, and it stops people from getting frustrated. It reminds you that we're all in this together. Then there's Axton. Axton is the oldest guy on the team, probably in his late 40s. He's a man of few words, the office monolith. He's seen it all, done it all, started programming when computers were the size of a fridge. He doesn't need to say much. When Axton talks, everyone listens. His approval is the only one that really matters. I remember this one time, a few months back. We were working on a huge data migration. The pressure was on. Cal was struggling with a script that kept corrupting data. He was getting visibly stressed. He leans back in his chair and sighs. "This script has more issues than my first car." And that car was basically just 3 angry raccoons taped together. We all laugh. The tension in the room drops instantly. Axton, without even looking up from his screen, just says, "Check your character encoding on line 47. You're mixing UTF-8 with ASCII." Cal checks. Axton was right, of course. Problem solved. That was our dynamic. Cal breaks the stress. Axton provides the wisdom. The rest of us fill in the gaps. We were a well-oiled machine. We didn't just work together, we were a unit. We'd go for lunch, grab a beer after a tough week. It was a good place to work. I genuinely didn't mind coming in on Monday mornings. Then, our old supervisor, a decent guy named Frank, retired. We gave him a nice send-off, wished him well. And then we waited to see who corporate would send in to replace him. The email arrived a week later. "Please welcome your new department head, Martha." The name didn't ring any bells. An external hire. We all just sort of shrugged. A new boss is a new boss. As long as they let us do our work, we didn't care. The day she started, the vibe in the office shifted. She walked in, and it was like a cold front had moved through the room. She was dressed in a power suit, sharp and severe. She gathered us in the small conference room for an introduction. We all sat there, and she stood at the head of the table. She started talking, and the corporate buzzwords started flowing like a river. "I'm excited to leverage the synergies of this team. We're going to be implementing a new paradigm of workflow. My goal is to deconstruct outdated workplace hierarchies." Cal shot me a look from across the table. His eyes were wide. It was the "what planet is this person from?" look. I just tried to keep a neutral face. First impressions, you know. She finished her speech and asked if there were any questions. Silence. What were we supposed to ask? "Could you please repeat all of that in English?" The first week she didn't do much. She just observed. She'd walk around the office not saying a word, just watching us. She had a little notebook, and she was constantly writing things down. It was unnerving. Felt like we were zoo animals being studied by a researcher. We tried to act normal. Cal would crack a joke, we'd laugh, and I'd see Martha in the corner, scribbling in her notebook. Axton would solve a problem with a quick, shouted-out suggestion, and Martha's pen would be moving again. We could feel her disapproval. It was a tangible thing. She never smiled, not once. At the end of the second week, she called another meeting. "Team," she began, her voice flat. "I've had some time to observe the dynamic in this department, and I am deeply concerned." We all exchanged glances. Concerned? Our metrics were the best in the company. This office operates on a foundation of what I can only describe as toxic bro culture. The air in the room went from cold to Arctic. The constant jokes, the shouting, the informal nature of your interactions. It creates an environment that is not inclusive or safe. I just stared at her. Safe? It's an office. The most dangerous thing in here is the coffee machine. Therefore, I am implementing a new communications protocol, effective immediately. She projected a slide onto the screen. Rule number 1. All work-related communication must be conducted through official channels. This means email or the company's ticketing system. No exceptions. Rule number 2. All non-work-related conversations are to cease. This office is a place of business, not a social club. Rule number 3. There will be a zero-tolerance policy for jokes, anecdotes, or any language deemed unprofessional. She looked around the room, daring someone to challenge her. Cal, to his credit, raised his hand. Martha, with all due respect, the way we communicate helps us solve problems quickly. It's how we stay efficient. Martha's eyes narrowed. Efficiency is not my primary concern, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. My priority is to create a safe and professional space. Your personal comfort or old habits are secondary to that mission. She looked directly at Cal. Is that understood? Cal just nodded slowly and sank back into his chair. He knew it was a losing battle. I looked over at Axton. He was completely still, his face a mask of stone. He hadn't said a word. He just watched her, his eyes unblinking. It was in that moment I knew something was about to change, and not for the better. The meeting ended. We walked out of the conference room and back to our desks in complete silence. It was like a funeral procession. The life had been sucked out of the room. The rest of that day was eerie. The only sound was the clicking of keyboards and the hum of the computers. No one said a word. It felt wrong. Unnatural. The next morning, the new era began in earnest. I saw it happen. A guy on the team, let's call him Dave, needed the server path for a new project file. Normally, he'd just ask Axton, who sat 3 feet away from him. Instead, I watched him type out a full, formal email. Subject: Inquiry regarding project file location. Body: Good morning, Axton. Could you please provide the full server path for the primary data file for Project Zeta? Thank you, Dave. He hit send. I looked over at Axton. He saw the email pop up. He read it, then slowly typed a reply. He didn't say a word. Just typed. 5 minutes later, Dave's computer pinged. He had his reply. Axton had sent him the path. An interaction that would have taken 5 seconds took 5 minutes, and created a digital paper trail. That was the signal. That was the moment we all silently agreed on the plan. We weren't going to fight her. We weren't going to complain to HR. We were going to follow her rules, perfectly, to the letter. Malicious compliance. From that day on, the office was a ghost town full of living people. Everyone had headphones on, even if they weren't listening to anything. It was a signal: do not disturb. Communication devolved into a bureaucratic nightmare. Need a password reset? Send an email to the IT guy on our team. Don't walk over to his desk. CC Martha so she can see you're following protocol. Have a question about a client's request? Forward the client's email to the team member responsible with a formal request for clarification. C Martha. Everything had to be documented. Everything was formal. The camaraderie vanished overnight. No more good morning. No more, how was your weekend? We'd walk in, sit down, put on our headphones, and work. At 5 p.m. sharp, we'd pack up and leave without a word. The team lunches stopped. The after-work beers became a distant memory. We were no longer a team. We were 6 individuals who happened to work in the same room. And Martha? She thought she was winning. I'd see her walk through the office with this smug little smile on her face. She saw the silence and mistook it for professionalism. She saw the lack of interaction and called it a focused work environment. She was a gardener who had pulled up all the flowers and was now admiring the beautiful uniform dirt. The impact on our work was immediate and catastrophic. A minor server glitch happened one afternoon. Before, Cal would have noticed, yelled, "Server's lagging," and Axton would have spent 2 minutes rebooting a process. Now, Cal noticed the lag. He documented the issue. He sent an email to the team with Martha CC'd, titled, "Urgent, Server Performance Degradation." It took 15 minutes for everyone to see and acknowledge the email. Then began the email chain from hell. Can anyone else confirm this? Confirmed on my end. What processes are you running? I am running the standard Q3 data crunch. Martha chimed in. Please ensure all reports are submitted via the proper channels before we escalate. The whole time, Axton knew the solution, but he couldn't just get up and fix it. That would be unprofessional. So, he waited. He replied to the email, I believe a manual reset of the primary data cache process is required. Do I have authorization to proceed? We all had to wait for Martha to reply. Authorization granted. A 2-minute problem took an hour and a half to solve. Our productivity plummeted. Tasks that took hours now took days. Projects that took days now took weeks. The numbers don't lie. Our metrics, once the pride of the company, were now in the toilet. Martha had to explain this to her own bosses. I saw her in a meeting with the director once. She was using her buzzwords again. We are currently in a transitional phase as we implement a more structured and professional workflow. There is a temporary adjustment period impacting output, but the long-term gains in safety and accountability will be substantial. She was a master of speaking without saying anything. The worst part was the social decay. I used to enjoy coming to work. I liked the guys I worked with. Now, I dreaded it. The silence was suffocating. It was heavy, oppressive. There was no relief, no moment of levity, just the endless monotonous clicking of keys. Martha seemed to notice the lack of morale, if not the reason for it. Her solution was, of course, a corporate one. She scheduled a mandatory team-building exercise. It was a Zoom call, while we were all sitting in the same room. We had to put on our headsets and log into a video conference with the 5 other people we could literally see. Hello, team, she said, her face pixelated on our screens. I wanted to create a safe space for us to connect on a more personal level. The irony was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. We're going to go around and each share one thing we're grateful for and one challenge we're facing this week. It was my turn. I'm grateful for my coffee, I said, my voice a monotone. My challenge is a bug in the new software update. Next person. I'm grateful for the weekend. My challenge is a corrupted database. It went on like that. Soulless, robotic answers. We gave her nothing. She was trying to mine for an emotional connection, and we showed her a barren rock face. Her smile started to look strained. This wasn't going the way she planned. The exercise ended in awkward silence. She had successfully created her safe space. It was so safe that no one felt comfortable saying anything real. So safe that it felt like a prison. After that failed attempt, she just left us alone. The silence continued. The productivity continued to drop. We were all just collecting a paycheck. The passion for the work was gone. Axton seemed to be taking it the hardest, in his own quiet way. He was a craftsman. He took pride in his work, in building elegant solutions. Now, his work was being strangled by bureaucracy he was forced to participate in. I could see the frustration in the set of his jaw. Cal was a different story. The life had just drained out of him. He used to be this vibrant, funny guy. Now, he just looked tired. He'd come in, do the bare minimum, and leave. He was a light bulb that had been unscrewed. It felt like we were all waiting for something to break. The system was unsustainable. The numbers were getting worse. The pressure from upper management was mounting. You can't hide a 40% drop in departmental efficiency forever, no matter how many buzzwords you use. I heard rumors that Martha was in meetings with the director almost daily. The walls are thin in our office. You can't hear everything, but you can hear tones. And the tone coming from the director's office was not happy. One afternoon, Martha came back from one of those meetings looking pale. She walked through the office and didn't even give her usual smug smile. She just went into her glass-walled office and sat there, staring at her screen. Something big was coming. We could all feel it. A couple of days later, the email landed in our inboxes. Subject: Critical Project. Project Oracle Launch. It was from the company's CTO. A massive new client, our biggest ever, was launching a new platform. We were responsible for the entire data backend. The deadline was non-negotiable. It was in 2 weeks, and the email ended with a single sentence that sent a chill down my spine. All eyes are on this. Failure is not an option. I looked up from my monitor. Cal was staring at his screen, his face ashen. Dave was rubbing his temples. I looked over at Axton. He was reading the email, his expression completely blank. Then he looked up, and his eyes met mine from across the room. There was no panic in his gaze, no fear, just a calm, cold certainty. He knew, just like I did. This was it. This was the cliff we were about to be driven off. Martha had built her perfect, quiet, safe system. And now it was about to be put to the ultimate test. A test it was mathematically certain to fail. So there it was. Project Oracle, the do-or-die mission. The company's future, or at least a big chunk of it, was riding on us. And we were a broken team. Martha called a kickoff meeting the next morning. She was trying to project an aura of calm, controlled leadership, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She had a massive multi-tab spreadsheet projected on the screen. "Team, welcome to Project Oracle," she began. "I have taken the liberty of breaking down the project into a series of manageable sprints. Each of you has been assigned specific modules and tasks." She clicked through the tabs. It was a labyrinth of Gantt charts, color-coded priorities, and dependency trees. It looked impressive, I guess, if you'd never actually done this kind of work before. To us, it was a nightmare. It was rigid, inflexible, and left no room for the kind of rapid-fire collaboration a project like this requires. "All communication will be handled through the official project management portal," she continued, pointing to a flowchart on another slide. "If you have a question for another team member, you will create a query ticket and assign it to them. They will have a 4-hour window to respond. All progress must be updated in the portal at the end of each hour." She looked at us, expecting us to be impressed by her organizational prowess. "This structure will ensure complete accountability and a clear, documented workflow. It eliminates ambiguity and keeps us all on the same page." I glanced around the table. Cal was staring at the flowchart like it was a piece of alien scripture. The other guys just had this look of blank resignation. Axton was leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, studying the chart. He didn't look angry or impressed. He just looked analytical, like he was observing a foreign species and its bizarre mating rituals. The meeting ended, and we returned to the silent tomb of our office. The work began. And within the first 3 hours, the wheels started to come off. The client's API was a complete mess. The documentation they sent was for an older version. Nothing worked the way it was supposed to. In the old days, we would have gathered around a single monitor. Axton would have been at the keyboard, me and Cal looking over his shoulder, throwing out ideas. "Try changing that parameter. What if we authenticate a different way? Look, there's an undocumented endpoint here." We would have had it figured out by lunchtime. Instead, I found the first inconsistency. I documented it, took screenshots. I created a ticket in the project portal. Title: A PI authentication failure, discrepancy with documentation. I wrote a detailed description of the problem. I assigned it to Axton, since he was handling the core integration module. Then I waited. I couldn't proceed with my own work until the authentication was fixed. So I started working on some low-priority documentation for my own module. Busy work. I looked over at Axton's desk. He was staring intently at his screen. He was working on a different ticket, one assigned to him by Martha about setting up the database schema. He couldn't look at my ticket until he finished his current task. Rules are rules. An hour went by. I updated my status in the portal. Work on Module B is blocked pending resolution of ticket number 734. I saw Cal was in a similar position. He was just sitting there, scrolling through old code, unable to proceed because his module depended on mine. The entire project was a chain of dependencies, and Martha's system had just poured concrete between every single link. We weren't a team working in parallel. We were a line of people waiting for the person in front of us to move. The first day ended. We had accomplished almost nothing. The progress chart, which Martha updated religiously, was a sea of red and yellow, barely any green. The next morning, she called another meeting. A daily stand-up, she called it. "I'm seeing a lot of blockers on the board," she said, a sharp edge to her voice. "We need to be more proactive in resolving these issues." Cal spoke up, his voice sounding rusty from disuse. "The main blocker is the API. We can't move forward until we figure it out." "What steps have been taken?" Martha asked. I explained the ticket I had created. She looked at Axton. "And what is the status of that ticket?" I was assigned a higher priority task, Axton said calmly. I will get to it after I complete the database schema. Martha frowned. This is not acceptable. We need to multitask. We need to be agile. She didn't understand. Her own system was preventing the very thing she was demanding. Axton was just following her color-coded priority chart. The database schema was priority 1, critical. My blocker was priority 2, high. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. She couldn't see that her solution was the problem. The days started to blur into one long, silent nightmare of ticketing and waiting. We'd come in, put on our headphones, stare at our screens, create tickets, wait for replies, update statuses, leave. The pressure was building. The deadline wasn't moving. I started to see the cracks in Martha's composure. She was walking faster. Her emails were becoming more abrupt. She started scheduling more meetings. Sync-up meetings, status alignment calls, blocker-busting sessions. Each meeting was an hour stolen from the little time we had to actually work. In one of those meetings, she tried to get us to brainstorm a solution to the API problem, but she insisted on doing it in a structured way. Okay, she said, standing in front of a whiteboard. I want everyone to write their ideas on sticky notes. No talking. We'll put them on the board and then group them by theme. We were a team of highly skilled analysts and developers, and she was treating us like we were in a kindergarten art class. Axton just sat there, motionless. He didn't write a single note. She noticed. Axton, do you have any ideas to contribute? He looked at her, his expression unreadable. My ideas are in the ticket I am currently working on, he said. Her face tightened. The whole week was a slow-motion train wreck. I felt a strange sense of detachment. I was doing my job, following the rules. If the project failed, it wouldn't be because I didn't follow the procedure. The failure was designed into the system. We were just passengers on the ship Martha had built, and she was steering it directly into an iceberg. The weekend came. We were all told we had to work. The office on Saturday was even more depressing than on a weekday. The same dead silence, just with the added misery of it being a weekend. By Monday, we had 1 week left. We had barely cobbled together a non-functional shell of the system. The client was getting antsy. They were asking for a demo. Martha promised them one by Wednesday, a promise she had no way of keeping. Panic began to set in for her. Real, visible panic. She abandoned her pretense of calm leadership. She was now in full-on crisis mode, which meant micromanagement on an epic scale. She created a shared spreadsheet where we had to log our activities every 15 minutes, literally. 9 to 9:15, reviewing ticket number 812, 9:15 to 9:30, writing code for Module C, 9:30 to 9:45, debugging code for Module C, 9:45 to 10, updating this spreadsheet. A quarter of our time was now spent just documenting what we were doing. The emails became more and more frantic, all caps subjects. Urgent action required. Response needed now. She started hovering. She'd stand behind you, watching you type. She stood behind Cal for a solid 10 minutes. He was trying to debug a complex piece of code. I could see the stress radiating off him. He was typing slower, making mistakes. Having someone stare over your shoulder like that is killer for concentration. Finally, Cal just stopped typing. He took his hands off the keyboard and waited. After a full minute of silence, Martha finally asked, "Is there a problem?" "It is difficult to focus under direct supervision," Cal said, without turning around. "It is not conducive to a safe and productive environment." He used her own words against her. She turned red and stalked back to her office. By Wednesday, the day of the demo, we had nothing to show. The system would crash if you even looked at it wrong. Martha had a frantic phone call with the client, full of corporate speak and excuses. Unforeseen complexities. Pivoting our implementation strategy. Ensuring robust quality assurance. She bought us 48 more hours. The final deadline was Friday at 5 p.m. That was it. No more extensions. The last 2 days were a blur. We were all running on caffeine and fumes. The system was a Frankenstein's monster of patched-together code, held together with digital duct tape. Every time we fixed one bug, 2 more would pop up. It was a classic cascade failure, born from a total lack of initial collaborative design. Because we never had that initial huddle, our individual modules didn't talk to each other properly. It was like building 5 different parts of a car in 5 separate rooms without ever talking to each other, and then trying to bolt them all together at the end. It was Friday, T-minus 8 hours. The system went down. Not just a bug, but a full-blown catastrophic crash. The main database had become corrupted. It was the point of no return. A fatal error. Martha came running out of her office. Her hair was a mess. Her professional mask was gone completely. "What happened? What's the status?" she demanded. I was the one who saw it first. "The primary database is corrupted. We've lost the master index." The color drained from her face. "Fix it," she shrieked. "Just fix it." We all just looked at her. There was no "just fix it." This would require a full restore from a backup, and then hours of work to reintegrate the latest data. Work that should have been done days ago. She looked around at our silent, unresponsive faces. And then she finally snapped. The dam broke. "Why are you all just sitting there?" she yelled, her voice echoing in the silent office. "Talk to each other, collaborate, work as a team. We are going to lose this client." It was the moment, the one we had all been waiting for. Everything stopped. The last few remaining keyboard clicks died out. The hum of the server room suddenly seemed deafening. Axton, who had been methodically documenting the database failure in a new ticket, slowly stopped typing. He deliberately reached up and took off his headphones, placing them gently on his desk. He swiveled his chair to face her. The movement was slow, measured. The entire room was holding its breath. He looked directly at Martha. His eyes were not angry. They were not mocking. They were just empty, devoid of any emotion. He let the silence hang in the air for a few seconds. Then he spoke. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a razor. "We are working as a team, Martha." He paused. "We are following the rules that you established. We are communicating professionally. We are documenting every step. We are operating within the safe space you created." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The truth of his words was a physical blow. I watched Martha's face. It was a slow-motion collapse. The anger, the panic, the desperation, it all just drained away, replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding. She looked at Axton. She looked at me. She looked at Cal. She looked at the silent, sterile office she had created. She saw the sea of monitors displaying her failed project management software. She finally understood. It wasn't our fault. It was hers. The system hadn't failed her. She had failed the system. She didn't say anything. She just stumbled back into her office and closed the door. The deadline came and went. We obviously missed it. The client pulled the contract that evening. The news came down via an all-company email. It was a massive financial hit. The following Monday, the atmosphere was funereal. We all knew what was coming. The director of our division, a senior guy who rarely came down to our floor, called a meeting. He asked for Martha and Axton to join him. The rest of us just sat at our desks, waiting. An hour later, Axton came back alone. He didn't look happy or triumphant. He just looked tired. He told us what happened. Martha had tried to throw us under the bus. She had a whole narrative prepared. The team was insubordinate. They engaged in a work-to-rule protest. They sabotaged the project out of spite for her progressive leadership. She claimed they were resistant to change and that their toxic masculinity made them unable to function in a modern, structured environment. She presented her version of events to the director. And then it was Axton's turn. Axton didn't make a speech. He didn't argue or get emotional. He had brought a binder with him, a very thick binder. He opened it on the conference table. It was filled with printouts, the email chains, the ticket logs, the status updates, the 15-minute activity reports. He calmly, factually, walked the director through the timeline of the project's failure, using Martha's own documentation as evidence. He showed them the 5-minute conversation that had become a 5-hour email chain. He showed them the critical blocker ticket that sat unresolved for 2 days because of Martha's own priority system. He showed them the hours of productivity lost to mandatory meetings and status updates. The evidence was irrefutable. It was a perfect self-documented case of catastrophic mismanagement. We didn't sabotage her. Her system sabotaged itself. Martha was speechless. She had been beaten with her own rulebook. They didn't fire her. That would have been too clean, too easy. Corporate punishment is more creative than that. They promoted her. She was given a new title, Vice President of Workplace Harmonization Initiatives. It sounds important. She got a new, bigger office on a different floor, but she has no team, no staff, no projects. Her job is to write white papers on corporate culture, papers that no one will ever read. She was exiled, put in a cage with golden bars, a safe space for one. Axton was made the interim department head. The first thing he did was walk out of the director's office, come back to our department, and stand in the middle of the room. "All right," he said, his voice back to its normal, quiet tone. "Project Oracle is dead. Management wants us to build a new internal version to replace our old system. We have 3 months." He looked around at all of us. "Let's get to work." Then he walked over to the big whiteboard that had been sitting empty for months. He picked up a marker. "Someone tell me a joke while I sketch out the architecture," he said. "A really dumb one." Cal, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, cracked a real smile, a real, genuine smile. "Why don't scientists trust atoms?" he said. Axton didn't even turn around. "Why?" "Because they make up everything." A groan went through the room. It was a terrible joke, and it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The ice was broken, the silence was shattered, the team was back. We spent the next hour crowded around that whiteboard, yelling out ideas, arguing, laughing. It was chaotic. It was messy. It was loud. It was perfect. We built the new system in 2 months, well ahead of schedule. It was the best work we had ever done. I learned something from all this. Martha thought our way of working was the problem. She thought our jokes and our shouting were signs of a toxic culture. But she was wrong. That chaos she hated, that was just trust. It was the sound of a team that trusted each other enough to be informal, to solve problems on the fly, to speak their minds without filling out a form first. She tried to replace that trust with rules and procedures, and in the end, her perfect, quiet, professional, safe space turned out to be the most toxic work environment I've ever known.